What's the Ring of Restoration dilemma? Fuck. I don't know! Google it. Hey, welcome back to the channel. We are going to talk about game design. Okay, so there are 4 game design principles that I commonly refer back to that I'm not necessarily sure everyone's going to be familiar with, and they could make for some quite fun reading. So let's talk about those today, starting with the Ring of Restoration dilemma. Wow, cool name. Wow, sweet. I was watching a review the other day for Subnautica by our lovely boy Joseph Anderson, who everybody loves. And he kind of almost touched on this when he was talking about when is it a legitimate design decision to waste someone's time. Now in this he was talking about inventory management, but it's a curious question, right? So I want to talk about the Ring of Restoration dilemma. In Dark Souls 2, in a little chest near one of the first bosses, is a pretty throwaway ring called the Ring of Restoration. The Ring of Restoration is a ring that you find pretty early on and don't usually pay much heed to, and can be forgotten pretty easily. But this little tiny ring causes a really interesting problem that you may not have picked up on if you didn't pay too much attention to it. And even though it might not play a big part in your game, psychologically it does something really, really bad to Dark Souls 2. Okay, so I'm going to give you some context for this, just so you can understand where I'm coming from. In Dark Souls 2, you heal with consumable items, meaning once you've used them, they're gone, right? So if you want to heal up, if you've lost some health from a fight, then you have to consume something in order to get your health back to the top. Sounds super straightforward, right? The exception to this rule is the Ring of Restoration. So the Ring of Restoration restores 2 health points per second. Now, just to clarify how little that is, a level 1 character, the starting character, not even the only starting character, the lowest level available starting character with level 1 health has 546 HP. Now to fill that from empty to full at 2 HP per second, if you want to do the maths here, it's about 4.5 minutes. But as the game goes on, you get more HP, you level up. So the minimum amount you're going to be playing with really is 546. And that means the minimum amount of time for a full heal is 4.5 minutes. And you're not going to just full heal once on any given run around the world. You have healing items, Estus flasks, which will regenerate, and other things, life gems that you can find. And oftentimes you'll heal 5-10 times on any given run. So if you push out that 4.5 minutes 10 times, it's 40.5 minutes, 45 minutes. So you can kind of see how that's going to escalate a little bit. So why is this a problem, and why is this ring in the game, I guess? Okay, so the ring is in the game, and it is a legitimate design decision, right, to put this ring in the game. The ring is in the game to be a bit of a safety net for people that are kind of scared about using other items, and also as kind of a trap to get players early on thinking, oh, it's brilliant, I don't have to heal anymore, and then you put the ring on and you see how slowly your health regenerates. It's almost like a joke, right? No, of course you're not going to use the ring. At best you use it to kind of supplement yourself, and as you're running around maybe 20 hit points have come back between these 2 fights or whatever. And usually after a while you realise it's not doing you many favours, and you toss it away and you put on another ring. So why is it worth talking about this one ring? There's like hundreds of rings in the game, and rings aren't even a big part of the game. This is just one tiny little ring. It's because of what it implies to your other loop of gameplay, that is, using regular healing items. So, the most important thing about the Ring of Restoration, and all 4 of the problems we're going to talk about here, is they are essentially design decisions that seem obvious and seem like they would be good game design, can often actually be kind of shitty game design. So one of the things you wouldn't want to do in a game normally is railroad a player down one line of opportunity. You want to give them choices, right? I can't remember who it is who described games as this, but it's a famous quote. God, Matt, Google it and put it up above my head. A game is a series of interesting choices, I think, is a famous quote, or something to that effect. So if you want to give a player a good game experience and you want to be a good game designer, you give a player multiple choices so that they can affect their own path. It's what diverges games from other media. You can direct your own path. So, when is railroading you the more acceptable design choice? Well, in this instance, if you start to realize what the two choices do, you realize that one choice is a superior design decision. If you can only consume healing items, there is no problem with the fact that when you take damage, which is the player making a mistake, your only resort is to use some of these items. If your only option were to heal via this shit ring, then every time you took damage, you would know that the punishment is to wait. When you give the player two options, neither of these choices seem like sensible choices anymore. It's not sensible to use a consumable item if you don't have to. If you can give yourself more choices in the future by having both options available, that seems like a more sensible player decision. So you should just wait for the ring to restore your health. But if you wait for the ring to restore your health, you're having a minimum of roughly 4.5 minutes of a shit time. So there is a bad option given to you. Either option now becomes a bad option. What would have been the only option, and therefore a fine option, oh, I took damage, my punishment is use this thing. Oh, I took damage, my punishment is wait a while. Now becomes a choice where neither outcome is desired. I don't want to use something that I have a limited stock of. I don't want to wait 4.5 minutes. I have to decide between two bad choices. And the game isn't trying to push this as a fun moral dilemma. This is something you're doing thousands of times throughout the game. Now granted, if you can just shake this and get rid of the Ring of Restoration, then sure, you don't have to make it a problem for yourself. But the fact that this dilemma is ever posed on the player is a fundamentally bad design decision. And it's the only instance where the game deviates from the one route that you would normally have. You should be punished for making mistakes in games, I guess, right? I mean, maybe even that's up for debate. But like, you should be punished. There should be it should be implied that you've made a mistake, and making a mistake should have a consequence. But when you give the player two bad options, all of a sudden you realize what you've done as a designer is taken away what could have been one acceptable option because it is the only option. There are instances where this is applied in other games. Any instance where you're given two options, one of which is to waste time and one of which is to be inefficient, you're essentially being thrown a Ring of Restoration problem. And I think like this is kind of one of those interesting things that you don't necessarily think is going to lead to bad design decisions. You might think that giving more options is always the sensible route. And I think you can kind of understand why it isn't. And it's an abstract, but it's something that I get to apply when I'm making games. And it's something that I think everyone should apply when they're making games. When is the new mechanic, the new idea that I'm introducing, going to cause a Ring of Restoration dilemma? When is someone going to see both of these options and feel like both of them are weaker as a result? Because it means the mechanic that you spent time refining is now seen as a negative by your player base. And I think that's something worth avoiding, if possible. So that is the first of the fun game design things. I'm sorry if this wasn't as funny as usual. I got a little bit of a high horse to get on. Dark Souls 2 should have known better, because Dark Souls 1 didn't do it. Dark Souls 1 was amazing. It was so good. In fact, let's quickly just mention how Dark Souls 1 did handle it. Dark Souls 1 has another ring called the Ring of the Evil Eye. Again, a ring that no one really uses because it's kinda shit. And basically what it means is when you defeat enemies, you get a bit of health back. Why is this different than the Ring of Restoration? Both of them are kind of shitty ways to heal. Both of them don't really supplement you in a meaningful way. But if you wanted a little addition to your healing, the Ring of the Evil Eye, number one, does not just give you a passive means through which to avoid a decision. It's still active, you have to go and engage, and there is another style of play introduced. It is not a time waster nor an inefficiency to use the Ring of the Evil Eye. You can't just weigh one up and say, this is fundamentally more sensible and less fun. The Ring of the Evil Eye is just a different path. Use my consumable item or take a risk. And risk reward is the biggest, most single adhered to game mechanic principle that is never incorrect to implement in your game. Risk reward is the only thing that should consistently be factored into your design decisions. Everything else should be questioned a little bit. I think that kind of explains it. Okay, I hope that explains it. We're going to talk about 3 others, so get tucked in for a little wild ride. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video. Speeding?
Speeding.
Okay, cool. Welcome back to the channel. Oh, you